Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery.
Today, we're going deep on Agile Retrospectives. We've got some great excerpts from this book, Agile Retrospectives, Making Good Teams Great.
Yeah, it's a classic.
By Esther, Diana Larsen, and Ken Schreiber. I mean, who doesn't want to make a good team great, right?
What's really cool about this book is how it tackles this universal need to constantly get better, as a team. They argue that even teams that are already doing really well, like high-performing teams, can still benefit from taking a step back and reflecting on how they work together.
Okay, so they lay out this 5-step framework, right? Setting the stage, gathering data, generating insights, deciding what to do, and then finally closing the retrospective. Sounds pretty straightforward, but I'm really curious about, what are those juicy bits within each step that actually make it work? What are the specific activities they recommend?
Yeah, so each of those phases is actually packed with activities that are designed to, guide the team's reflection. So, in setting the stage, you might start with something simple, like a check-in activity, where everyone just shares a word or a phrase describing how they're feeling at that moment.
Oh, I like that, just to get a sense of where everyone's head is at.
Exactly. Or you could use a focus on, focus off activity, which helps set some, some communication guidelines for the session.
Oh, okay. So, what are we going to focus on? What are we going to, leave aside for now?
Yeah, exactly. It's about, establishing that, that psychological safety right from the start so that everyone feels comfortable sharing their thoughts and feelings without, worrying about being judged or anything.
I feel like that's so important.
It is. It really is. It's the foundation of everything. If you don't have that trust, you're not going to get those real valuable insights later on.
Yeah, you got to feel safe to, be honest.
Totally. Honesty is key.
Okay, so then you move on to gathering data, and I see they're suggesting things like a timeline activity and using color code dots. I'm intrigued by that. Why the visual element there?
It's really smart, actually. Imagine a visual timeline, right? It represents the entire project or maybe just an iteration of the project, and everyone gets to add sticky notes for all the key events, milestones, decisions, anything significant that happened.
Okay, so it's like a big visual history of the project unfolding on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the cool part. They use these colored dots to mark their emotional highs and lows throughout the project. So green could be feeling energized, red could be frustration, yellow for confusion. You get the idea.
Oh, so you can actually see where things went smoothly and where the team might have hit a snag.
Precisely. And those clusters of red dots, for example, they become conversation starters. You can dig into what was happening during those moments and why people were feeling frustrated.
I mean, that's fascinating. It's almost like a heat map of team morale throughout the project.
Exactly. And it's about connecting those dots, not just between the events themselves, but between those events and how the team was actually feeling.
Okay, so we're not just talking about the facts, we're talking about the feelings too.
Yes, because to get to the really meaningful insights, you got to go beyond just the facts. You need to tap into those emotional currents that run through a project.
This is already giving me so many ideas for my own team.
That's great to hear.
But I'm also noticing this theme running through all of this. The crucial role of the retrospective leader.
Yes.
I mean, the book mentions managing activities, time, group dynamics, and even managing yourself. That one caught my eye.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Because it seems like leading these things could be emotionally intense.
Yeah, it can be. You're creating a space for people to, potentially air grievances or admit mistakes. It's a delicate balance.
It definitely sounds like it. So what are some of the specific challenges they highlight for the person leading the retrospective?
Well, one of the biggest ones is staying neutral.
Right.
It's easy to get swept up in the discussion, especially if you're part of the team, but the leader needs to remain objective. They need to make sure everyone feels heard without, steering the team towards any predetermined conclusions.
Oh, so staying impartial even when things get a little bit heated.
Yeah, exactly. It takes practice.
I bet. What else?
Another big one is, navigating those tricky group dynamics. You might have some people who dominate the conversation, or maybe there are some simmering conflicts between team members.
Ah, yeah, those are always fun.
The leader needs to be able to skillfully manage those situations, making sure that everyone's voice is respected and valued.
Right. So it's you need to create a space where people feel safe to be vulnerable, but also make sure that the conversation stays, productive and respectful. That sounds like a lot.
It is. It's a unique skill set. But the book does offer like some really helpful strategies for handling those tough moments. Like, for example, they suggest encouraging people to use I language.
Oh, interesting.
So instead of saying, you always do this, you frame it as I felt frustrated when this happened. It shifts the focus from blame to, personal experience.
Right.
It's less accusatory.
Right. It's about how it made you feel, not about like pointing fingers.
Exactly. And that can really de-escalate a tense situation.
That's a great tip. I'm writing that one down.
Glad to hear it. It's about framing things constructively,
Yeah.
focusing on observations and feelings rather than placing blame. And that can really foster an environment of like mutual respect and understanding, even when there are disagreements.
So even when the content gets difficult, the leader's role is to kind of maintain that sense of calm and make sure the team can work through those challenging moments productively.
You got it. And remember, the leader doesn't need to have all the answers. It's about asking the right questions, guiding the discussion, and ultimately empowering the team to find their own solutions.
It really feels like we're already getting to the heart of what Agiles is all about. It's
Mhm.
not just about delivering software. It's about building this culture of open communication, continuous learning, collaborative problem solving, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why these retrospectives are so powerful. They give you a structured way to step back, reflect on the team's experience, and actually identify actions to improve.
It's about making those like small, consistent changes that can eventually lead to like huge leaps in performance.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So we've talked about the structure, the leadership. We've even touched on the emotional aspects of these agile retrospectives, but there's a whole world of activities within this book that we haven't even explored yet.
Oh yeah, there's tons. And I'm particularly eager to dive into those activities for gathering data and generating insights. They offer like a treasure trove of techniques to unlock a deeper understanding of the team's experience.
Well, then let's not waste another minute. We'll be right back to delve deeper into those fascinating agile retrospective activities.
So we're talking about gathering data and how important it is to capture not just the facts, but the feelings, the vibes.
Yeah, it's like getting the full picture, not just like the official version of what happened.
Right. And one of the activities they suggest for this is the timeline activity.
Okay, yeah. We were getting into that.
So, imagine you've got this big wall and you create this timeline. It could represent the whole project or maybe, just one sprint, one iteration. And everyone gets to grab some sticky notes and they'd write down all the key events, milestones, decisions, anything that, stands out.
So you've got this like giant visual history of the project right there on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. But then here's the twist. They use these color code dots, right?
Ah, yes, the dots.
So each person gets these dots in different colors. Maybe green is like, high energy, red is frustration, yellow for when you're just like totally confused. You get the idea.
Okay, got it. So like if I was feeling super overwhelmed during that code merge, I'd slap a red dot on that part of the timeline.
Exactly. And someone else who is, super excited about that new feature launch might put a green dot there. And so you start to see like this visual representation of the team's emotional journey.
It's almost like a heat map of team morale.
Yeah, exactly. And you can instantly spot those patterns. Like if there's a cluster of red dots around a particular event, that's something you want to talk about.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like what was going on there? Why was everyone so frustrated?
Right. And it's all about connecting those dots, not just between the events, but between the events and how people were feeling.
So we're not just capturing what happened, but we're also capturing like the emotional impact of those events.
Precisely. And that can lead to some really, really powerful insights.
Totally. I'm already like thinking about how we can do this with my team.
Great. I'm glad it's resonating. And, beyond the timeline, there are other great ways to capture those emotional insights.
Yeah. Like what?
The book talks about this activity called Mad, Sad, Glad. It sounds like really simple, but it can be super effective.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that work?
So you literally just have 3 posters labeled Mad, Sad, and Glad, and everyone writes down events or situations from the project that made them feel each of those emotions.
So under mad, someone might write, like when we had to scrap that feature after weeks of work.
Exactly. Or under sad, it could be, when we had to work those crazy late nights to meet that impossible deadline.
Oof. Yeah, I've been there. And hopefully there are some glad moments too.
Of course. Like when we finally shipped that release and everyone loved it.
Yes, those are the best.
It's a structured way to bring those feelings to the surface and then to see, like, are there any recurring themes? Are there certain things that keep triggering those negative emotions?
Right. So if you see like a bunch of mad notes about constantly changing requirements, that's that's a pretty clear signal that something needs to change in the way you manage scope.
Exactly. And what's great about this activity is it's not just about venting, you know.
Right.
It's about using those feelings as data points to figure out, okay, where are the areas for improvement?
Love that. It's about getting to the root of the problem.
Exactly. And that's where the next phase comes in, generating insights.
Okay, so this is where we move from like data collection to analysis.
Right. You've got all this information now,
Yeah.
and you need to connect the dots, look for patterns,
Mhm.
figure out the why behind those mad, sad, and glad moments.
It's about like understanding the story behind the data.
Exactly. It's not enough to just know that people were mad about something. You need to dig deeper and understand why it happened and, more importantly, how to prevent it from happening again.
And I imagine this is where that open and honest communication we were talking about earlier becomes even more important. Right.
Absolutely. People need to feel safe enough to, like, really speak their minds, even if their perspective is different from the majority.
So how do you create that space for like truly open dialogue? What are some of the techniques they recommend?
Well, there are a couple of really interesting ones. There's brainstorming filtering, and then there's the classic 5 whys.
Okay, brainstorming, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Just get all the ideas out on the table. But what about filtering?
Yeah, so filtering is about, like, separating the wheat from the chaff,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
You might brainstorm a ton of ideas, but then you need to use some criteria to, like, filter out the ones that are actually the most relevant, the most actionable.
So like let's say you're brainstorming reasons why the team's velocity has dropped. Right.
You might filter those ideas based on, like, things that are within the team's control or things that are likely to have a big impact.
Exactly. So you're not just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Right, you're being strategic about it.
Exactly. You're focusing on the ideas that are most likely to lead to real change. And then once you have a handful of promising ideas, you can use the 5 whys technique.
Ah, yes, the famous 5 whys. I've heard of this one.
It's like a classic root cause analysis tool, right?
Yeah.
You keep asking why until you get to the bottom of the problem.
So if the team is missing deadlines because of, like, last-minute bugs, you might ask, okay, well, why are we finding these bugs so late in the game? Because we're not doing enough testing. Why aren't we testing enough? Because we don't have dedicated testers, and so on.
Exactly. And you keep going until you get to the real underlying issue.
It's like peeling an onion, but instead of tears, you get insights. I love that analogy. It's so true. And it forces you to move beyond those surface-level explanations and really identify the core problem, which is essential if you want to come up with effective solutions.
Makes sense. Now, I know there are even more tools in the book for like generating those aha moments, those key insights. What else stands out to you?
One that I find really visually compelling is the fishbone diagram.
Okay, a fishbone diagram. I'm picturing like a literal fish skeleton.
You're not far off. So imagine the spine of the fish representing the main problem, and then you have all these bones branching off, each one representing a different category of causes.
Okay, I'm starting to see it.
So if the problem is, like, low team morale, you might have bones for communication, workload, recognition, different things like that.
And then within each of those bones, you brainstorm all the specific factors that might be contributing to that aspect of the problem.
Exactly. It's a great way to, like, visually organize your thinking and make sure you're considering all the possible angles.
I like it. It's very very visual.
It is. And once you've, identified those root causes, you can move on to brainstorming solutions in the decide what to do phase.
Okay, so now we're at the point where the rubber meets the road. We're at decide what to do.
Right, the action phase. We've gathered all this data, we've got all these insights, and now it's like, okay, what are we actually going to do about it?
Yeah, this feels like the most empowering part, right? Actually taking those aha moments and turning them into like tangible changes.
Absolutely. It's about turning insights into action, not just letting them, sit on a shelf and gather dust.
So what kind of tools or frameworks do they recommend for this stage of the process?
Well, one of the most popular ones is the retrospective planning game.
Yeah.
It's a structured way to, like, take those big improvement goals and break them down into smaller, more manageable tasks.
Okay, I like that, bite-sized pieces.
Exactly. So you start by, identifying the specific goal you want to achieve, and then you brainstorm all the steps, all the actions that are needed to actually get there.
So, like, if the goal is, improve communication, you might brainstorm things like hold daily stand-up meetings or create a shared online workspace or schedule regular one-on-one check-ins.
Exactly. Those are all great examples. And then you can prioritize those tasks, figure out how much effort is each one going to require.
Yeah.
And you can assign owners to each task so things are actually going to get done.
Oh, so you actually walk out of the retrospective with like a concrete action plan?
That's the idea. You don't want to just, have these vague ideas floating around. You want to have a clear roadmap for moving forward.
Love that. And speaking of like actionable steps, the book also talks about setting SMART goals.
Yeah, the good old SMART goals.
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound.
That's the one. It's a classic framework for a reason. It really helps you set goals that are, well, actually achievable.
It's the difference between saying, like, we need to communicate better, which is like super vague.
Right.
And saying something like, by the end of next month, we will hold a daily 15-minute stand-up meeting to discuss progress and blockers.
Yeah, that's much better.
It's specific, it's measurable, you can actually track it.
Exactly. And if those traditional SMART goals feel a little too rigid for your team, there are some creative alternatives out there.
Oh.
The book mentions one called the Circle of Questions activity, which I really like.
Okay, tell me more. What's the circle of questions?
So picture this, right? The team is sitting in a circle.
Okay.
And each person takes turns asking a question about the specific topic you're trying to improve.
Okay.
So let's say you're focused on improving code quality. Someone might ask, what are the biggest obstacles we face when we're trying to write clean code?
Okay.
And then the next person might ask, well, what are some specific steps we can take to overcome those obstacles?
And so on. Oh, so it's like a roundtable discussion, but with a more focused approach.
Yeah, exactly. And by the end of the circle, you've got a much clearer understanding of what the problem is, and you've probably generated some really good potential solutions.
I love it. It's very interactive.
It is. It's a great way to get everyone involved.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground here, but we can't wrap up our deep dive without talking about the final stage, closing the retrospective.
Right. Tying a nice little bow on everything.
Exactly. So what do they recommend for this closing stage?
Well, one of the simplest but most effective activities is a good old plus delta.
Plus delta. Okay, yeah, I've heard of that. It's about identifying what went well, the pluses, and then what could be improved, the deltas, right?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And you can apply it to the retrospective itself.
Oh, okay.
So you can ask the team, what did you like about the process? What would you change for next time?
So a plus might be like, we had really good energy and open communication during the retro.
Exactly.
And a delta might be, we spent way too much time on that one topic and we didn't get to everything we wanted to cover.
Perfect examples. And it gives the retrospective leaders some really valuable feedback, so they can continuously improve the process.
It's like a mini retrospective on the retrospective.
Exactly. Very meta.
I know, right? But it works.
What else do they suggest for this closing stage?
One I really like is appreciations.
Appreciations.
It's so simple, but it's like such a powerful way to end on a positive note.
Yeah.
Everyone just takes a moment to, express appreciation for something or someone on the team. Oh, so it could be like, I really appreciate Sarah for always jumping in to help when we're stuck.
Yeah, exactly. Or, I appreciate the team's dedication to, delivering a high-quality product.
Well, it's just a nice way to, acknowledge each other's contributions.
Exactly. And it helps to, reinforce those positive team dynamics.
Yeah, those little moments of recognition can go a long way.
They can. And then, of course, we have to talk about ROTI.
ROTI, return on time invested.
Yeah. And this isn't about, putting a dollar value on the insights you gained. It's about making sure that the team actually felt like the retrospective was worth their time.
Yeah, that it was valuable.
Now, you might ask, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the value of this retrospective? Or, what was the most valuable thing you learned today?
If the ratings are consistently low, that's a pretty clear sign that you need to make some adjustments.
Yeah, for sure. You want to make sure that these retrospectives are actually a worthwhile investment for everyone.
Right. It's about closing the loop, making sure that the time you spent was time well spent.
Exactly. And I think that's a good place to wrap things up. This book, it's not just about activities, it's about building this culture of continuous improvement.
It's about giving teams the tools and the space to reflect, learn, and grow together.
And ultimately to become those high-performing teams that we all aspire to be.
Well said. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.